Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hi, this is Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, here for a new episode. I am joined today by Brandon Coats, who is the Global Product Manager for the Robotics Division of MHS. MHS is a solution provider for many different aspects of distribution and fulfillment. You may remember from the ProMat series that I did interview MHS at their booth as well to talk a little bit about them. But Brandon's going to talk to us more about robotics today, which is his expertise, and also emerging technologies revolving robotics as well. So, Brandon, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for having us here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. So why don't you give us a little bit about your background and talk to us a little bit how you ended up getting involved with robotics, and then give us a little overview of MHS as a whole and kind of their robotics division as well.
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved with robotics since the university. So the first job out of college, I had joined a German OLP provider, so we were a software developer, and OLP, for those who don't know, is offline programming.
Okay.
So we would generate various forms of toolpath and simulation capability for typically manufacturing-based custom robotic work cells, as well as custom machine tools used in manufacturing. So in the scope of that work, I was very much involved on the kinematic side with developing custom one-off forward and inverse kinematics for these work cells. And then also I was using the post-processor, as we called it, which was a translator, basically a script that would run and translate from a universal app source machine language and over to a proprietary control-specific language, such as the Siemens 840D controller. And then you see that a lot within the sector that I was in, which is mostly aerospace. So I developed quite a bit on the software side on setting up how to program and interface with these robots that were out in manufacturing. And I was also developing the user interface that other people were in turn using to generate their own toolpath and to maintain their production. So throughout this period, I really developed an appreciation for a state-of-the-art user interface and how it comes to user retention over time, and whether that the end customer was going to end up using and be successful with the software or end up dropping it later on down the road.
Okay.
So outside of that software scope of what I was doing, I was also working very much within aerospace. Initially, it was automotive, and then we had the recession in 2008, and so the company decided to make a strategic pivot, and we ended up in aerospace more than automotive.
All right.
And so I was in Europe for a lot of the time. A company that we were working closely with, it was an OEM provider. They had sold $40 million worth of machine tools to Airbus in Europe.
Oh, wow.
So that was 4 machines, roughly $10 million apiece. And they were located, like I said, across Europe. So there was one in Stade outside of Hamburg in Germany. That was the upper wing skin machine. We had another one that was in Illescas, just south of Madrid. 2 machines there. We did the lower wing skin cover for the Air 350, as well as the Section 19 portion of the fuselage. And then there was another machine tool that was in Nantes in France. So I spent quite a bit of time over, in the front lines with the customer, and developing specific software and solutions, and developing process capabilities so that they could have lower and lower takt times and more capable processes for these parts that they were cutting for the aircraft. So I did that for roughly 4 or 5 years, and I decided that I was going to make a switch and get more in line with the integration. Integration has always been something that I've been very close to. I'm very hands-on, and so I wanted something that was more than just the software piece of it. And so I actually ended up jumping over to the company that I was working closely with. That company is Flow Aerospace. And so they were the OEM provider and the company that sold that $40 million worth of machine tools over an Airbus.
Yeah.
So there, we really worked with any carbon fiber composite aircraft that was in production since the 80s. So we worked with Boeing, we worked with Airbus, we worked with Bombardier, Embraer, Cessna, really Lockheed Martin, really all of these guys. Anyone who makes an aircraft, we were involved with that program in one way, shape, form, or another. Oh. So in this role, it kind of shifted outside of software, and it was more on the side of process definition. So a lot of it turned into me ending up back in Airbus in Spain and helping them out with improving their tack times, improving their overall process capability, having a continuous improvement effort, doing rate ramping. So when we went in, it would take us 3 to 4 months to cut one part and to set up the process for that one part. These parts, to give you an idea, they were 120 feet long, 110 to 120 feet long, and it would take us weeks and weeks and weeks just to cut one portion of the wing skin in the beginning.
Oh, wow.
So the rate ramping was intended to, when I went back, to go from a rate 1 to a rate 2, and that's how many ship sets they do per month, and to try to get them up to a rate 7 or a rate 8 so that they could maintain their production. What we found when we were there there was a general knowledge gap and shortage when it came to the operations side and the people that were staffed with the machine tools that were out in the field.
Okay.
And we ended up having to run an education campaign so that we could really go back and help the customer out by helping them identify which resources were going to be the most capable in order to sustain their own process. So Airbus had a nice education campaign, and so they had this academy, as they called it, and so we basically went in and helped them with some general aptitude tests so that they could test an operator before they brought them to the machine tool, then test them again 6 months later, 12 months later. So we had these various education campaigns, and we went out and we developed these aptitude tests so that they could assess their own crew and be able to kind of change and tune their culture internally. So I did that for several years, and then the whole time throughout this period with both of these companies, I was traveling 80 and 90% of the time, and traveling internationally. And so I got to a point where that travel was really untenable for me, and so I had the opportunity to come to MHS.
Okay. And
just doing a little bit of research on the material handling industry, I noticed how strong of a growth there was in the background, and there was this growing appetite for robotics. Definitely. And so that's what really led me to the MHS.
Yeah. So how long have you been with MHS?
So it's been a little bit over 2 years now.
Okay.
Yeah. So switching from aerospace over to material handling, there was a little bit of a learning curve in the beginning, but what you find is the automation and the robotics that are there. Yeah. There's very much a nice connection between the two industries.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, to your point, robotics in our industry, in the material handling industry, is really just exploding in the past couple of years, even more so this year, with all the investment that's being made in different companies and acquisitions and those things. It really is a good time to be involved in robotics and kind of be on the front line there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about MHS as a whole, and then I guess tell us a little bit about their robotics division, which you're involved in.
Sure. So MHS is a single source supplier for automation. We are a large systems integrator, and so we will produce these turnkey systems. Every component, whether it's conveyor-based, sortation-based, we're taking all of that, we're putting it together. And then we're also coordinating all of the physical work and action at the actual customer site in order to pull everything together. And then we've got the controls and software expertise in-house as well.
Okay.
So we have a large portion of the company is controls and software. That's really been our secret to success from the very beginning. We've been able to go out and take a Boimer sorter or another type of sorter and then stitch these systems together. And then there are cases where the integrated system is not coming together when we're not the prime, and we end up going back down the road. And because we do a piece of the system, our end customers end up finding that if there's any gap along the way, we can actually step in and help them complete their overall mission. So these large systems can range anywhere from hundreds of thousands of dollars up to $60 or $70 million for a turnkey system.
I can imagine, yeah.
So MHS itself is it's based out of Mount Washington, Kentucky. That's where the headquarters is at. We have a brand new site that has gone up over the last year.
Okay.
And then it's essentially 250, 300,000 square feet, and we're in the process now of doubling that. So we have essentially a twin of the building that it's gone up, and it's nearing completion. So we'll have close to 600,000 square feet at this one site by the time it's all put together.
Wow.
And then we have the global footprint, so we have several sites across the U.S. There's 6-7 different sites across the U.S. that are notable. If you look at Atlanta, we have Atronics and A2I, which are more or less controls and software houses.
Okay.
And so those companies can help us out in various ways related to the controls and software when it comes to these integrated systems. They are developing their own decentralized controls platform. They have an IoT group to do more of the cutting-edge technology and predictive analytics. And so they do kind of that piece of it, whereas MHS, we're doing the conveyor and sortation piece of it, and then kind of pulling all these disparate pieces and companies together to a comprehensive whole. And then in Europe, we have a presence there as well. I believe that originally started so that our key customers that are in the U.S., they have operations that are in Europe. And so doing that early on was a little bit difficult to assist them with, whereas if you have a business and a presence in Europe, it becomes a lot easier to do that and to assist them. So we have a site in the Netherlands, which is Van Riet. They do sortation technology. And then we have another company in Parma, Italy, and that company is OTM, and they do modular, flexible conveyor and sortation systems.
Okay, great. So why don't you tell us a little bit more, I guess, about the robotics side, and specifically, I guess, right now, with your clients when they're coming to you, what are they asking for the most, or what are they most curious about in the robotics field?
Yeah, right. So we noticed that robotics is increasing very much, and so you see this trend over time. We've put together a dedicated R&D team that is really addressing some of these issues. And so we look back, and we're kind of connecting between the general labor challenges over time in conjunction with the technology trends that you see for automation. So the price of automation is coming down over time. And so we really want to go in and find these various use cases and figure out how to help the customer with new products and figuring out how to address some of their labor challenges. So I'd say a large piece of it is going to be demand on the customer side. That's kind of a driver. And so they have this ever-increasing demand because of e-commerce and the rocket fuel that's out there with this large growth year to year. So the tasks that labor is doing, some of their kind of most critical pains in terms of labor, you can look out as a whole within the sector, and you can see that there's a high rate of turnover for specific positions. As an average, you can see typical figures are 25 to 35% turnover per year.
Definitely.
But I can definitely attest to even more specific, positions than that, where we see turnover rates that are as high as 300 or 400% per year.
Wow.
And so if you start to look at those specific operations, you see that they are very much laden with very difficult to do, very tedious physical tasks that people are not typically very good at. And so we see an excellent case there where robotics can come in and essentially answer that pain point. So there's several reasons for this kind of labor shortage. Some of them are generational. With our customer base, some of them are also like seasonal in nature. And so whatever the nature of these are, we try to look kind of behind the curtain a little bit and understand where the true gaps are. And then we try to place our efforts in a place that makes the most sense both for our company and for the customer as well. We want to help as many of our customers as possible with one simultaneous effort. So if you go in, if you find a good automated system to replace a specific task within an operation, we can do that, and there's essentially like a first and a second wave of labor. So the manual labor, the very tedious tasks that you go in and you're replacing with the automation, what you'll end up finding is that you can very easily go in and solve that task with the modern technology and the current level of robotics that's out there. On the other hand, you have this second wave that is emerging. It's coming after that. And so you find that you have to have engineers and technicians that are capable of keeping these automated systems and these robotic platforms essentially online and well maintained, and keeping the nice high uptime that the systems are well known for.
Interesting. So
at a high level, just want to say at a high level, you have a growing labor shortage, and that's extending through time. It's 5-10% per year, and then you have this dropping cost of technology. So for each one of these use cases or potential new products that we're looking at, we want to make sure that we have the right timing. We could go in and we could assess one product this year, and if we look at it again 1 or 2 years down the road, it could be a completely different lens that we're looking through because the market has changed.
Yeah, it's changing so much.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
I think there's so much more adoption to the technology as well. And I think the other thing too is that, if we look at maybe a couple of years ago, there was like this robotics is a little scary. Maybe it's intimidating. But I think now it's, especially, being at ProMat, it seems like there's just this acceptance that that's it. That's what's going to happen. So along with that, you were mentioning and talking about how
People are getting more comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. And
when people are getting more comfortable with technology, they're learning how to use it, they're learning how they can adopt it, how it fits into their operation and their culture as a whole. So I see a lot of changes that are coming up very quickly within robotics. The autonomous mobile robots market is growing very quickly. We're seeing automated platforms for loading and unloading semi-tractor trailers for entire, whether it's palletized items or whether it's loose load, doing that through an automated system. And then you have new sortation robots that are going in, whether it's a singulation robot or you have a mobile form of a sortation robot, or even some of the new and cutting-edge ASRS systems that are out there. So there's a lot of change that's coming up very, very quickly. Yeah. And I think it's changing at a rate that we've not really seen before to this point.
Definitely, yeah. So what do you think in terms of, because you mentioned talking about how some operations are having trouble keeping employees in those kind of, tedious, repetitive types of tasks. So I've talked to, a couple of different people on the podcast, different episodes about robotics, obviously, because it's such a hot topic in the industry. And there seems to be, at least what I've gathered from talking to people, is that there's kind of two schools of thought, where there's this idea of creating the collaborative robot, or cobot, as some people call them, or there's the push for like the fully automated dark warehouse. So what do you think is really the future, or what are you maybe personally, or MHS, what kind of direction are you thinking of going in, or what do you guys think is the way to go?
I think you're really going to need both in order to be competitive.
Okay.
You're going to see that the amount of labor shortage that's there, I think it's going to be, let's say, even more drastic than what we're anticipating now. So each year, I think it will compound and it will become worse and worse. And so to have a collaborative robot, to be able to work essentially very close to a robot and to amplify an operator's ability to produce within one of these warehouses or logistics hubs, I think that has clear benefits. I think when we look out and we see how Amazon is using robotics and they have their Kiva systems that they've brought in-house within their robotics program, that goods-to-person type of fulfillment, I think that trend is very clear. And I think, since 2012 when that acquisition was made, now you see a lot of different companies that are going in and they want to try to go in and repeat that. Those robots are not necessarily super collaborative in nature. You do have articulated arm collaborative robots, and those robots are really driven by the different levels and layers of perception and safety that are baked into those units. So they can essentially tell through a LiDAR sensor or another form, light curtain, and basically tell if you're approaching the robot or very close to it. And then you can gradually slow down the speed of the robot. So I think the collaborative piece is very, very important. It'll be very complementary in nature with the operators that are currently doing these physical tasks.
Okay. It
can also serve to deburden so that they don't have to lift as heavy of items as what they ordinarily would have to lift, and so they can do more and go faster.
Yeah.
And so I see that as a piece of it. But I think that the growing demand is going to outpace what collaborative robots can do, and I do see a push for this dark warehouse or lights out type of solution.
Yeah.
The technology that's out there today, I don't think we could do it completely lights out, and it goes back to this kind of second wave of labor that comes in when you put automation in. But I think you could take a logistics hub or a warehouse that might have 400 or 500 people staffed. And I think with the current level of technology, you could bring that number down to something like 60 or 70 people. But then the people that are there are fulfilling higher value roles than what they were typically fulfilling before. So they are more productive because of the collaborative nature of some of the self-driving vehicles and the robots that might be in the warehouse. So I do see a couple of different trends there. I think we're going to end up doing those in parallel, though. That's my take.
Interesting perspective, definitely. Yeah, I think it's I see it kind of in the same way. I think there's going to be certain operations where you're going to see that maybe there's not necessarily the need to have the people because it's just the same thing over and over. But then I think, there's still going to be those things that are nuances where you do need that kind of different level of thinking or different type of touch from the human. So it will be interesting to see which way it goes. And I think your perspective is kind of where my thinking at is that there's going to be somewhat of a balance of both as well. So talking about that, so recently you guys had participated in the RIA AMR conference, which was in Louisville. And you mentioned about your new facility that sounds like it's under construction now. And that was part of the tour for the conference. So what really did people get to see when they go into your R&D facility? Is it really like automation setups that you guys are testing through, or what does your R&D facility kind of look like?
Well, when we went and we hosted that tour, it was not actually at our headquarters. So we have a separate center of excellence for research and development. We have actually two separate sites in Louisville, and those are outside of the headquarters that we have in Mount Washington.
Okay.
So they came to one of our specific R&D sites, and specifically where we had this autonomous mobile robot products that we've been building up for our customer base.
Yeah.
We're terming this product the detachable carts. And so what it's doing is it's essentially replacing a tug operator. In the traditional operation, you have parcels that are going into a logistics hub, and so they're coming off of the truck. That parcel is going up an extendable conveyor, a short run of conveyor after that, and then it goes to basically a centralized branch of conveyor where all of these kind of merge together. And then at the end of that centralized branch, then you're going to have labor that's there. And they've done this operation the same way for, I believe, the past 20 years or so. But you have carts that are lined up, and the operators that are there will essentially look at a barcode or a human-readable label that is on the parcel, and then they'll load it onto a specific cart. So part of this in the operation is them doing a sortation process. So we are helping them with that sortation process, but more once everything is onto the cart, instead of doing a sortation process that's just down to the outbound wing, which is typically 20 or 30 outbound doors, we can take that to a finer resolution. And so that sortation process becomes more meaningful. And then the robots, where they come in, is that they can automatically tunnel underneath of the carts, raise up and lock onto the carts in a manner that's safe during transport. And then we can do that transport from point A to point B within the facility and take them to the outbound door cluster or door module where they're going to be unloaded from the cart and into the truck after that. So all of that navigation in between is autonomous navigation that's provided on the robot. So that was one of these demos that we showed during the tour. That was essentially the highlight of what we were showing, because it was connected back to the conference. The robot supplier we've been working very closely with has been Mir Robotics. Okay. So Mir is based out of Denmark, and we've been working with them for about the last year. We had the very first units that came off their assembly line for their Mir 500 and 1000. Right. So before that, they had a lower and lighter payload robots, and so we weren't too interested in those. And when they started their production of the 500 and the 1,000 kilogram payload capable robots, that's where we kind of stepped in and started working very closely together. So it's important to know that Mir's been a really great company to work with. They've put a lot in, kind of co-invested with us in terms of time spent and sweat equity in this thing to develop a very functional product that could be used within the courier space. And then there are parallels where instead of moving a cart with parcels around, we can move pallets in a very similar fashion around within a facility. So we do both the pallet aspect as well as the cart aspect when we were doing the tour. Another one of the demos that's related back to MHS was our robot singulator. So we have a singulation robot, and that robot has state-of-the-art vision system. And so we've essentially built a camera from the ground up, and we have very proprietary software that's running on it. And we're running neural networks in order to be able to differentiate and pick up individual parcels out of a bulk stack, and then to singulate that flow so that it can be inducted on a downstream sorter. So we showed and highlighted that product as well, which is very much robotic. And then we had a part picking robot. So it's a piece picking robot. So for that, we had a Mir 200 mobile robots as the mobile platform, and then we had a UR3 collaborative robot that was on top, and that was powered off the battery on board of the Mir robots. And that had a vision system and a gripper so that it could go in and pick parts out of inventory and then place them in a box so that they could be shipped out of the warehouse. Oh, wow. So that was another one of the demos. And then the last one that we shared was the large parcel singulator. Okay. So the large parcel singulator is really getting back to the heart of what MHS does. There's quite a bit of conveyor that's in it. There's also a singulation process with large parcels. And then there is a van reach shoe sorter that is part of the product as well. So with that shoe sorter, we actually have vertically integrated within our business. And so we manufacture, we design, manufacture, and we deploy and integrate this shoe sorter. And then recently, this is with the typical shoe style of sortation. And then recently, we have also come out and we've deployed a cross-belt sorter as well. And so Van Reet was responsible for the shoe sorter, and then we have OCM that is responsible for the cross-belt sorter. So we showed those during the tour. Yeah. And then we also had a group of partner vendors that had attended with us. They shipped their robots and various equipment on site. And all in all, we had quite a few companies that had joined and built up their demos, and just to add value to the overall tour for the attendees. It was a very, very great turnout. Roughly a third of the conference had come in and attended.
Oh, wow.
So the Mobile Robot Conference itself, that conference was over 400 people. So within the people that were attending the tour on the next day, we had 140 plus people. And then counting all the people that are there doing their demos, the vendor partners and ourselves, we were up over 200 in the building here. So it was quite a good turnout for the company as well as the RA.
Definitely, yeah. Everybody wants to see that the next biggest thing, right? So what do you think was of the ones that MHS demonstrated, what do you think was the most interested solution from people? Like what had the most reception that people were most interested in, I guess, learning more about or potentially getting into their facilities?
I think because of the nature of the conference that was there the day before with the autonomous mobile robots, I think the mobile robot piece of it was essentially the highlight for the events. But people and other companies, they do like to see how an integrator can come in and kind of address some of their pain points. And so we got quite a few leads that came out from it, and companies that would be very interested to have an integrator to kind of help them de-risk some of their responsibilities within their operations, and then help them figure out which technology is really the fit within the operation. Okay. But I think because of the nature of the conference, it was so focused on mobile robot that kind of became the highlight for the overall tour as well.
Got it. Makes sense.
The robots that had joined, the robot suppliers that had joined us during the tour, we had companies like Vecna, Auto Motors, Waypoint Robotics, Agalox, Mir, Cognex, Humatics, and SEW. They all joined, and they had a live demo that we could share with some of these prospective customers and attendees.
Very cool. I wish I was there. Now, with the automated robots and things of that nature, what you mentioned, kind of people were looking for an integrator to kind of de-risk things. So what, for people that are listening and, they have an operation or they work in operations and they're thinking about potentially investing in some type of automation or robotics in that space, what would you tell them they should do as their first step? Because this is, for a lot of companies, is probably fairly new and they don't have much experience. So what would you advise them is the best first step to take?
Well, the best first step that you could possibly take is going out and doing a bit of research and then understanding your own operation and what might be the most applicable. You can always reach out for the integrators, and anyone can feel free to reach out with MHS and kind of approach us. And, typically how we'll handle it is that we'll interact and kind of engage with the customer, and then we'll go on site. We'll do a site visit. Okay. We'll kind of observe the operation that they've got, and then we'll do essentially like an assessment for the operation as well as the culture that's present there, and figure out what is the best play with the automation. And it's not always going to be something that's going to be clearly like mobile robots. That is more of a future-leaning technology. So what I see now in most cases is that it's mostly more of someone who wants to think of themselves as like an early adopter. Okay. But at the same time, you see the inherent disruption that is kind of inherent within that sector. So that is quickly growing, the sector as a whole within mobile robotics, but it depends on the operation. So if you need an ASRS installed, or it depends whether you're moving totes or you're moving pallets or what the material actually is. In any case, it's going to be a very different automated system. That's where a company like MHS can really step in as an integrator, and we've learned a lot of the lessons of what works and what doesn't work as well in the past, or in terms of the communications and the controls and how to tie everything together, what plays together nicely and what doesn't. And so we can provide some general guidance about what works and what doesn't work.
All right, great. So, Brandon, thanks so much for talking about MHS and your robotics sector with us. So how can people get in touch with you and get in touch with MHS to start that process or find out more information?
Yeah, the easiest way would be to contact us through our website. The website is mhsglobal.com, so www.mhsglobal.com.
Okay, great. And we'll post that website and some more information about MHS on the blog as well at thenewwarehouse.com. So thank you again to Brandon Coats for coming on and talking about MHS. This has been the New Warehouse Podcast. Thank you again, Brandon.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.